Okay, so piston rings. First off, the GM 29869 piston rings are pretty hard to find, but these are just Kawasaki rings. So you can order the ring set 13008-2060. It's the same stuff. So we'll start with the top, the chrome plated ring. Then we'll put the second ring with the RN facing up. You can see it there. That'll be facing up, and then we'll have the expander ring here for the oil. We'll go ahead and put those on the piston, and then we will use the piston ring compressor to install it into the engine. And one thing to note here for your ring end gaps is, and this is per the service manual, note how the second ring is at about a 45-degree angle with respect to the arrow indicator on the piston. And then for the first ring, the chrome-plated ring, it's 180 degrees from that. So per the service manual, these are where your end gaps are supposed to be located. All right, we used our piston ring compressor and then seated the piston into the cylinder and tapped down with a mallet a couple times until the piston slid into the cylinder. And then the connecting rod bolts here and here, we torqued those to 106 inch-pounds. And following the same process, the second piston is now in, and note that the arrow again points towards the flywheel side. Torque the connecting rod bolts to 106 inch-pounds. And now we are ready to reinstall the side cover. All right, we have our gasket in place. And what we'll do with our side cover is make sure that the governor weights are closed. And as we install this side cover onto the engine, we'll make sure that the gears for the governor and the oil pump mesh nicely with the camshaft gear. Another thing to note when reinstalling, I did not replace the oil seal because it was in pretty good shape, but you do want to pack some high temperature grease in the ring as described by the service manual prior to installing the side cover. As we begin inserting the bolts for the side cover, remember it's long bolt, short bolt, long bolt. Over on this side, long bolt, short bolt, short bolt. Don't tighten any one down before you get the others snug. And the pattern that we'll follow is we'll start here on the middle two, then we'll do our cross pattern from the outer corners and then down to the last corners, and then we'll snug them up and then torque. The torque value for these M8 bolts is 186 inch-pounds. Next, we are going to install a brand new water pump assembly, and we'll mesh the gear with the camshaft gear again through this hole. And we will install using the bolt that went into this location. And then we'll snug it down, won't tighten it down just yet because we'll also have to install the cover for the water pump, and also make sure that you're using new gaskets. All right, now we'll install our water pump housing with new gasket using the bolts as they came out in the order they came out. The M6 bolts will be torqued to 78 inch-pounds. And don't forget the one that we've already installed here for the water pump. And then the M8 bolt, again, just like the other side cover bolts, that will be 186 inch-pounds. Okay, so wiring harness is brought back around the engine. and we've reconnected the connector here. Next, we will get ready to install the adapter plate using the 4 bolts here and the oil drain bolt. And when you go to install the oil drain bolt, well, I guess the adapter plate itself, remember to use a new washer between the adapter plate and where the oil comes out of the side cover. On the adapter plate, these 4 bolts are torqued to 132 inch-pounds, and then the large drain bolt, that gets torqued to 221 inch-pounds. Next, we will put some anti-seize compound on the drive shaft of the engine, and we will install the rotor with the drive gear onto the shaft. And note that this is a pretty easy installation for this rotor because there is no keyway at all on this drive shaft. So just make sure you've got an even application, thin application, don't need a whole lot of anti-seize compound on the drive shaft. All right, and so next we'll take the rotor over to the engine and install it using this long bolt. And don't forget at the end to make sure you've got your drive gear in place. And this rotor bolt gets torqued to 204 inch-pounds. Next, we will slide the stator housing over the rotor and secure it using the 4 overbolts. And with the stator housing back on, we will torque the overbolts to 120 inch-pounds. Next, we will secure the brush holder in those fastener locations using the original screws. Next step, we'll lower the generator down by removing the block so that we can install the fasteners that go through the isolator mounts and to the generator. Remember, it comes up from the bottom, so they're not captive. A little bit hard. We just hang the generator off the table, install the bolt up through, and then do this for both sides. Next, we will remove the paper clip that is currently holding the brushes so that they can again make contact with the rotor. And we will just check and make sure that the alignment looks good and that we have full contact between the brushes and the rotor. And next, we will install the cover plate with the drive gear, the coupler that goes on the end of the rotor, this gear here. And then we'll torque these 2 bolts down to 60 inch-pounds. So you can see the paper clip has been removed and the brushes are now firmly seated against the collector rings. And now we will reinstall the fuel pump with these 2 nuts here. And then we'll reconnect the electrical connector, as well as I'm going to take the time now to replace this fuel filter. And next, we're going to install our push rods, cylinder heads on both sides, and the intake manifold. And this is kind of a process where these all go together at one time. So I will detail that once it's on to share the service manual process. Make sure to insert the guides to hold the new gasket in place and to help locate the head as it goes down. New gasket is on, and next will be the head. Okay, so again, heads are on, but not torqued. Just a little bit snug, because next we're going to take our intake manifold with new gaskets and get the 8 bolts started in a cross pattern to get those tightened down. We will torque the intake manifold bolts down, and then we will come back and torque the head bolts down. All right, and with the intake manifold on, what we'll do before we torque the head bolts, we're going to torque the intake manifold bolts, and we'll do it in a cross pattern for the inner 4 bolts first. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we'll do the cross pattern for the outermost 4 bolts. So 5, 6, 7, and 8. And this is a 2-step tightening process. First we go to 35 inch-pounds, and then the last is 69 inch-pounds. And now that the intake manifold is torqued, we will torque the heads. It's a star pattern. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is going to be, I think, about a 7-step process. You go 27 inch-pounds at a time until you are up to 186 inch-pounds, which is about 15.5 foot-pounds. Do that for both sides, and then the heads will be torqued. And next, we will just double check our valve clearance or valve lash. For this particular engine, should be 6 thousandths. So in this case, on the intake valve on the aft cylinder, we only have 1/1000th clearance between the valve and the rocker. So we need to adjust this one. So we'll loosen this lock nut, and then we'll back off the screw there a little bit until we can fit the 6 thousandths feeler gauge in between, and then we'll tighten it back down to 79 inch-pounds. All right, valve lash is set. So we'll go ahead and put our valve covers on, and those 4 bolts get torqued at 52 inch-pounds. All right, while we're here, we'll put this spring back on. It goes from this hole up to that hook. And next up is reinstalling the exhaust manifold. So getting to one of these, there's an Allen head up in there. What I'm using is just a long Allen drive with the swivel head on it. It's pretty much all I've got that can actually get into that exhaust manifold bolt. Then you got one there. Make sure you use fresh gaskets between the exhaust manifold and the head. You've got the 2 bolts right there going in. And then I forgot to mention too, as we were removing the exhaust, but there's also this bolt and this bolt. And next will be this coolant hose here. Got a new O-ring seated. Remember, this is where that ball fell out, so we're gonna put that ball kind of in the cone right there. And then this will get reinstalled at this location, and the hose goes over the water pump housing. And now with that coolant hose reinstalled, we'll reinstall this coolant hose that runs from here and comes under the exhaust manifold over to here. All right, so got the coolant hose back in place and the hose clamp secure, and also rerouted this wire back up and reattached here. And now the next step will be to feed the wires back up through the control box and reinstall the control box. All right, we've got the sound shield back in place. So far, just 3 screws, one here, one there, one there. We'll put the 4th one in just a minute. It goes right there. All the wires routed through. So now we'll go ahead and feed these through the control box and then make our connections down here to those 2 connectors. And we'll start hooking everything up inside the control box. All right, with the control box on, we'll now reach down through and connect these off-white color connectors. They are pokey-yoked, so you can't mix them up. So just go ahead and connect those. And now all the connections have been made. We've put the 2 spade terminals back onto the voltage regulator. And we've reinstalled numbers 2 and 4 to the breaker. And you can see down in there, 1 and 3 are on this stud right here. Over on the forward side of the generator, we've reinstalled the ground to the chassis. We've also reinstalled the J1 connector and finished up with all 4 of the screws for the sound shield and tightened those down. Next, we'll install the thermostat here and reinstall the heat exchanger with 2 new gaskets, O-rings. We'll reconnect these wires here and then reconnect these hoses and tighten them down with the hose clamps. Okay, thermostat's in. Use a little bit of grease to hold these O-rings in place. And now we'll reinstall the heat exchanger. All right, and now the heat exchanger is installed. Reconnected the hose here, the hose here, the hose here, and then reconnected the wiring leads here to the high temperature cutoff switch. All right, we've reattached our fuel line through the sound shield enclosure. And next will be to install the coolant line from the exhaust manifold over to the forward head. And with a new gasket, we'll torque these 2 bolts to 52 inch-pounds. Reconnect your wiring here. Make sure you reconnect all of your hoses in the manner that they came off. And we'll keep moving forward. All right, the carburetor assembly is installed with a new gasket and those 2 bolts. Note how we also got the linkages put back together. And we've reinstalled the wiring to the choke. Redid this connector. Finished running this hose over to the choke. Put our wire ties back on. And next we'll reinstall the bracket that will hold the side cover. And next we'll reinstall this battery unit here back in its location, just making sure to reconnect everything the way that it came off. Next we will install our hard fuel line that runs from here, the fuel pump, up to the carburetor. With the hard line installed, we are ready to install the spark arrestor And once the spark arrestor is on, we'll put the side cover back on with the overflow coolant tank. And spark arrestor is installed. And the side cover and coolant reservoir are back on. So now at this point, just got to fill up with fluids, do the maintenance like on the impeller and such, and get it ready for a test run. All right, all prepped and ready for a test run. Filled up with oil, filled up with coolant, ready to plug in the gas, battery. We'll see what happens tomorrow. She's running.